So we're working on the Frontier, our own personal Dungeons & Dragons 5e campaign. A big feature of the Frontier is making a business, starting a community with the fellow players, and doing all manner of tradey and economic nonsense. Simple enough, you'd think, except that it's totally not, and we hate it. No, we don't actually hate it, it's just a fucking chore. As this is all about running a business, farming, and community building and the like, certain statistics are functionally ironclad. Your community needs to eat, and if they don't, then people die. You need to, then, take care of them with enough animals, and those animals need herders to keep them in line. And herders may bring families, and they will need to eat also, and the list goes on. Standard price of living expenses by hirelings and followers will be directed toward a town pool, which all founding members will get a share of every year, and all animals need to be tracked, their production values set, and their reproductive and maturity periods noted. And before we knew it, we were right back into agrarian research writing. Woo! Yeah! Back to the real science stuff our Patreon is so poorly known for. Suffice to say, there's a tremendous amount of writing and monitoring and researching and information compiling we've been doing. Biggest thing we want to do is make a comprehensive list of animals and their prices, production values, etc. And we want to make a comprehensive trade goods and equipment list, because there will be all manner of grain being harvested, milk being made into cheese, meat being sold at the tavern, etc. For us, as a GM, it's very important that our players have all of these statistics entirely and readily available to them. So, we've been scouring the internet for literally like 2 or 3 months at this point, looking for everyone's best trade goods tables for 5e. And you know what? They all suck, and we'll tell you why. They fail the wheat test. What is the wheat test, Shy? We hear you ask. Well, we're so glad you asked. See, there's 2 tests that really make the system really work. The coin test, that being that 50 of any coin makes 1 pound of the metal in the goods list, and the wheat test, which is far more important. Wheat is 1 copper piece per pound. That is the first trade good entry in the standard player's handbook for every edition of Dungeons & Dragons since 3.0, as we recall. And we should recall, we played it and had all the books. So the trade goods table has been pretty standard. 1 goat is 1 gold piece, 1 pound of wheat is 1 copper piece, 1 pound of iron is 1 silver piece. Salt has changed, but only for the cheaper, so that's fine as far as we see it. So, you can see there is a basic trade goods table to be followed, and in our humble opinion, one should probably start there and work your way out in an expanding list where things make sense when compared to already present trade goods lists. Wheat, the most common of all standard staple goods in the medieval era, costs 1 copper piece a pound. Boom! Easy peasy. And thereafter, all of our grains should be priced in accordance to that. But then, when we look at all these other lists that people have made online, we never see that. Hell, we just spent $30 on a magical society, Silk Road, because it's got over 1,000 new trade goods, and it says that wheat is 7 copper pieces a pound. And maybe, we could forgive this slight if the lesser grains had to take up the 1 copper space, but even barley, largely historically considered to be reserved for horses and truly destitute people, is 2 copper pieces a pound. And then, over here on Candlekeep.com's library, we have an equipment and wares guide that's trying to sell us wheat berries for 2 gold per pound. And barley, for that matter, is 1 gold piece per pound. How do the common people even eat? Now, we know people are just trying to make shit up instead of even trying to follow the standard pricing of the things listed in the book. These prices are trying to make the game completely different. They're trying to make a completely different game. Why does everyone fail the wheat test? We honestly wish we knew, and we'll continue doing research in the meantime. So, what's the answer? Easy. Judge everything around the trade goods list given, and use the goods and services list to utilize bits like the chunk of meat and a hunk of cheese for potential values you may use later on. For example, 1 day of feed for amount is about 10 pounds, which costs about 5 copper pieces. If we assume that this is barley or some other lesser grain generally reserved for horses or the utmost poor, that would put barley at 2 pounds per copper piece, and this would absolutely make sense when compared to the wheat test. From there, we're going to start comparing the historical rarities for grains compared to wheat, and build up. The problem with that ends up being things like milk and eggs, which many of our player characters will be producing by the hundreds every day. That's where the hard parts come in. Realistically, we're still working on proper prices, and will be for some time, but when that happens, we'll do a follow-up to this article. Regardless, we cannot stress enough that the system has already given enough to start with. All you need to do now is work with things like milk, eggs, other grains, and fresh fruits and vegetables. Historically speaking, these things had serious value as trade goods and will/should be a staple in your regular campaign. In a marketplace, people will be selling apples picked fresh that morning, cuts of venison hunted and butchered the night before, fresh fish from the local water sources, cabbage pilfered from a local farmer's fields, pies cooked overnight to be sold to passers-by, and bolts of cloth painstakingly woven for sale to help a family make ends meet. Not only does this sort of spectacle and standard fare ultimately fill up your world and make it seem real and active, but also opens up potential economic opportunities for your players. Maybe your characters don't want to go through the trouble of moving pelts from one town to another, but the idea of hiring the services of some guy to run cattle in the background for them while they hop from town to town may appeal. And the idea of having that guy's lovely young wife milk those cattle and make that milk into cheese to sell to taverns they pass by might help your players feel less like passing consumers and more like active members of this world's economy. It's one thing to roll through a village, hit up the inn, and pay for your room and board, but it's far more engaging and somewhat more realistic to the time to instead barter off some fresh cheese or a slaughter of a few sheep to spark good relations with the town and make an attachment that may come in handy later on. So often are the players guarding caravans, but it doesn't appear to many these days to let them run one. And of course, the idea of being fully fledged tradesmen traveling from port to port on some grand old ship is similarly appealing to those with a sense of adventure, piracy, and high-stakes exploration. Our point is that there is a lot that D&D can still offer that most GMs and players alike don't use. Why, just recently, we very much had our mind changed on scrolls and their utility in the game. There may be many opportunities to do more than just murder hoboing around. And we don't know why people keep failing the wheat test, but if you're going to make your own trades good list, you must not fail the wheat test yourself. Use the trade goods you've already been given as a solid set of road signs to help you get on your way properly fleshing out your setting. Previous editions back to 3.0 may also be used for certain references as long as they do not contradict the present edition's list. And one last thing, let us know in the comments, if a half pound of cheese, a hunk, is only 1 SP, how much do you think a gallon of milk should be? 1 gallon of milk, for the record, makes 1 pound of hard cheese or 2 of soft.